Hey, so good morning, folks. Little housekeeping, obviously, before we get started. Going to ask again, just please put your phones on mute. And we ask that any questions that you have throughout the presentation, you can pop those into the chat window, and we're going to answer questions and have some good dialogue at the end of the presentation. And then, of course, we'll be following up with you directly. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining Equinix and Microsoft today, and welcome to this webinar session where we're going to discuss ExpressRoute best practices that empower you and accelerate your business goals with Microsoft. I'd like to thank the Microsoft team for enabling this session today. Together, Microsoft and Equinix are helping our customers transform their digital business. So enterprises continue to feel the strain of legacy network architectures as a barrier for innovation in Azure. And of course, Platform Equinix addresses these challenges and uniquely helps enable customers address the challenges facing them today, especially. So in this session, we're going to explore the unexpected challenges that have been imposed by this horrific virus that is affecting all parts of our society. In today's environment, customers, as we're seeing, are scrambling to connect hundreds of thousands of employees who are now working from home and wondering, of course, is this the new normal? And so how do you maintain productivity? How can Microsoft help? And how can Equinix help? So a lot of focus we're seeing has been shifted to remote access. These are obviously unprecedented times, and what does that mean to our customers, right? So we will take some time to highlight some best practices, not just for these specific times, which I think we're all hoping will come to pass fairly quickly, but the basic tenets of moving forward with, to modernize your data center and optimize your WAN strategy that's going to provide you with the flexibility to weather unforeseen events, and then also take advantage of the ongoing innovation that's happening in Azure. So we're going to explore those foundational concepts today and some practical ways to get started. We at Equinix, we work extensively with the Microsoft teams to bring customers proven methods to connect to Azure, bringing unique solutions to fit their specific environments and stage in their cloud journey. And to be completely candid, we love working with Microsoft. We love that they consistently demonstrate their interest in the customer's holistic hybrid and multi-cloud environments, and they truly have their customers' best interest in mind at all times. So without more delay, I want to just share the agenda. I've kind of shared a little bit about what we're going over today, but just in terms of sequence, this is what it looks like. Y'all can read this here, but we're going to go through essentially what was in the invite and just touch on some best practices and practical ways to get started. And the folks who are presenting to you today are here. So I'm Todd Dalton. I'm a strategic alliance manager in support of the Microsoft relationship. I work at Equinix. Dustin Smith is a Microsoft Azure specialist. He's going to go over Windows VDI, their virtual desktop solutions, what it is, what customers are doing with it, and he's going to also provide some high-level introduction in the networking in Azure. And then Chad Arnold, who is our Director of Sales for Pacific Northwest, is going to discuss optimal connectivity through the nearest on-ramps in Azure to access the resources and consume the applications and everything in the most efficient way. So while companies deploy and scale to far-flung locations and remotely at home, what kind of challenges are coming up for them? He's going to discuss that. Before we jump to those two guys, I'm going to cover just a little bit about our relationship. We have a very strategic 360-degree relationship with Microsoft. They're an incredible partner for us, and we're really together solving the whole stack for customers. While Microsoft is very focused on applications and business innovation, and also delivering those applications, we are at Equinix very focused at the foundational layer of the OSI model, which is networking, physical connectivity, and access to the resources. So together, we're bringing a complete solution to our customers. We have, it is notable, a ton of their GovRamp on-ramps into Azure. I believe we are exclusive provider there. And we have more direct access nodes into Azure than anywhere else in the world. Platform Equinix is a global platform that helps all applications run better in Azure. We have 205 locations globally, and the goal of interconnecting all of the resources being used as part of a company's IT mix is realized here at Equinix. So together with Microsoft, we're creating essentially a digital edge strategy for ongoing changes, consumption, innovation, which delivers the performance and predictability and security that's required for today's enterprises, as well as flexibility. So this is a quick snapshot of our 209 interconnection facilities globally. We provide an incredible platform for our customers to innovate and create a consistent look and feel across their IT operations. This has been over 20 years in the making, with $25 billion invested, where all of the network service providers, the ISPs, the cloud providers, anyone providing MRR, utility-based content that you're looking to consume and innovate, as well as the major SD-WAN head-end controllers like Viptela and VeloCloud and Ariaka and ZenLayer. All of those companies are also housed inside of Equinix to help you control and optimize your last mile. And of course, as Microsoft surveyed the landscape, this is an overlay of where they have deployments with Equinix. As they surveyed the landscape and looked at the best place to deploy Azure Cloud, it makes sense that plenty of those locations were with Equinix. So Microsoft has deployed ExpressRoute in more Equinix data centers than any other provider because we're able to connect customers and provide that private, high-speed, low-latency connection that helps remove the barriers to cloud consumption and accelerate customers' innovation. And because of our partnership globally, we're able to help our shared customers very quickly grow into new markets in a very consistent and scalable manner, and get that best possible latency by leveraging our Equinix Cloud Exchange. So customers that are not in non-ExpressRoute markets even can get access through our ExpressRoute, to ExpressRoute through our ECX Cloud Exchange fabric. And so Microsoft doesn't even, if they don't have an ExpressRoute node in, say, like Stockholm, but the customer is using an ECX fabric in Stockholm, they can access ExpressRoute as if they're directly adjacent to the edge node of that cloud. So a very, very robust partnership that we have that's been a long time in development in the making, which provides some unique solutions for our customers to innovate and be able to respond quickly to what's happening in the market. So I am going to turn this over now to Dustin Smith, our Azure specialist. And Dustin, I would say take it away.
All right. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. I want to go ahead and talk about a few things around kind of the Microsoft view and what we're seeing in terms of optimizing hybrid cloud. As you can imagine, I'm speaking a lot to customers right now about how they can do things around bringing in remote work scenarios and leveraging the cloud to do that with the new work from home initiatives that exist in our world today. I primarily deal with our state and local government customers, but all of my peers and our commercial enterprise team, it's pretty much all hands on deck. And networking, hybrid networking in Azure is a huge part of that. And Equinix has been working with us diligently on making sure that we have connectivity in place for customers who are federating their Azure environments and their on-prem environments and extending those out to our remote users that are working out there. So when we look at things like remote work and some of these scenarios that we're seeing, obviously this recent, what we're seeing with the virus is driving organizations into solutions that they may not even have had before. I've been on calls with customers all morning about customers in varying different phases of their implementations, and working with them on how we bring them solutions in rapid fashion. And we're seeing this obviously all across the board here with customers in financial services, government, healthcare, and basically any types of users now. Whereas before, I think you looked at specific roles within an organization and you said, hey, these are probably our best fits, such as maybe short-term employees or call center workers or branch workers that aren't located in offices that need to be able to access specific applications or a full desktop within the enterprise. We call this service Windows Virtual Desktop, and it is now generally available. Basically came out about fall of last year in Azure, running as a service in Azure. We're the only solution that's able to deliver a multi-session Windows 10 experience. So that's a key thing. For customers that are leveraging Office 365 and Office 365 Pro Plus, Windows Virtual Desktop brings in optimizations to allow customers to be able to have quick access to things like their Outlook client, their other productivity applications within the Office suite, OneDrive, pieces like that. And we also have a lot of customers that have been leveraging our traditional, or what we call RDS, or remote desktop services, for solutions that they might have been publishing desktops and apps out there. We can also bring those into the Windows Virtual Desktop experience to allow customers that have had existing investments to go ahead and leverage their RDS deployments in with this solution. And we're working with customers right now to deploy this to scale up. I had a customer this morning that's going to be looking to scale up to about 1,000 users here in the next week or so, on bringing all their remote workers, that some of which that worked in court locations that didn't even have their own laptops, that we're providing this out to them so that they can start to access their applications remotely, just like they were in the office. As I mentioned, it's the only multi-session Windows 10 experience. And the other thing that we've seen a lot of is with Windows 7 has gone end of life in the past couple of months. Many of our customers tell us that they've still got legacy applications that rely on Windows 7 desktops, and this solution is another way to present a Windows 7 desktop so that customers that still have applications that rely on Windows 7 that haven't been able to get to Windows 10 yet can be able to expose those applications and address some of the extended security updates. So we provide patching within the Windows 7 experience so that those Windows 7 clients are still protected through extended support. And that's another area that we've seen a lot of interest in, obviously, with security right now, is being able to continue to provide that experience with extended support, being able to take advantage of this with Windows Virtual Desktop. And we talked a little bit about this, and enabling optimizations for Windows, or for Office 365 Pro Plus, where customers are using applications such as Outlook and OneDrive for Business. They have their own individual profiles. We take advantage of containers to encapsulate those profiles. So for non-persistent environments, they'll be faster and more high performing. And the easy thing we talk about when we talk about Azure and Windows Virtual Desktop is, we're not having to rely on building out an entire server infrastructure. This is built out in Azure as a service. We're available in 54 regions and 140 countries. So as I mentioned, right now with the outbreak, we're seeing customers from a global perspective be able to deploy this in regions for all over the world to be able to address those remote work situations that are coming up obviously every day, with more and more organizations forcing work from home in remote situations. And the great thing is that in Azure, you can go ahead and manage this service from the existing Azure management portal that you're already familiar with. Existing security and compliance that you're already leveraging through products like Azure Active Directory. You're already taking advantage of that security through your identities that you've already populated out there. We also have a pretty extensive partner ecosystem. I'm working with a couple of partners now on even doing things like for customers that say, hey, I want to go more of a DaaS route, more of a desktop as a service. We've got partners that are helping us extend that capability so that they will actually manage your entire WVD portfolio for you and add an additional management layer on top of that. So again, something that we're seeing really popular right now for customers that are saying we need a solution, that can be stood up within days or within no more than a week, that we can get out there. And obviously the hybrid networking part is key to this. We see with Azure and where we're going with cloud is really kind of that tipping point where more and more traffic is egressing and ingressing through cloud than into on-prem data centers. And so we say that this is really requiring a rethinking of network designs, network security out there that maybe we didn't have before, and as well as a new application delivery model. And Windows Virtual Desktop is a great example of that, and customers needing to deploy services and applications rapidly to both internal and external customers out there. So this new networking approach where we're establishing that connectivity, establishing that security paradigm, and monitoring is obviously key when we talk about Azure and cloud. Azure has a global presence. So as I mentioned, 54 regions worldwide. We also have, and a lot of my customers, since I'm in the government space, reside within our government cloud. So we actually have dedicated government regions within the U.S., within Arizona, Texas, and Virginia. And we also have DoD regions dedicated for DoD customers. Equinix is a great partner in helping us extend Azure and connectivity into these regions, and they help us provide that connectivity into these regions where many of our customers, especially in the government space, need access, rapid access, low latency, directly into both our commercial public regions like a West US 2, and they need to be able to access resources in US Gov Arizona, for instance. So having a partner that's working with us to be able to provide solutions to both our government regions and our commercial regions is key with my customers in the government space, to be able to have a one-stop shop to connect to both. And when we look at networking services in Azure, we've got quite a few networking services. I'll tell customers that, if we look across the entire Azure environment, we have approximately 200 plus services that exist in Azure. It's a pretty big space. And even as you can see here in the networking space, we have a huge amount of services, even things that customers will say, wow, we didn't know that Azure could do things like this. We didn't know that these services existed. A lot of what I'll see when we talk about hybrid networking in Azure is many customers will say, you know, how can we get started? What are some of the key things? So when we look on the left side, this connect side of this circle, we start to configure services like our virtual networking, our virtual WAN. And we'll spend a lot of time here talking about ExpressRoute. And many of our customers will say, I want to start with ExpressRoute connectivity into Azure. The easiest thing to start with is VPN. You can establish a small VPN gateway into Azure. Although many of our customers will say if their direction is really establishing an enterprise virtual data center in Azure, ExpressRoute is key. Being able to have rapid sub-millisecond response into Azure with ExpressRoute is really where most customers of mine are going, especially in state governments where they're looking to establish a central ExpressRoute path into Azure from a central location, i.e. a statewide IT organization that manages IT for the entire state, or in the case of the enterprise where a central IT body might establish a centralized ExpressRoute path and let other lines of business ride that path out to Azure and into our various regions. And in addition to kind of the connection part, we talk about services like the firewalls or NSGs, which stands for Network Security Groups, are also key. We also have web application firewalls, Azure Monitor services that you might expect from Microsoft. Maybe you're familiar with System Center. A lot of those products have been absorbed into the Azure cloud, as well as services like Application Gateway and Load Balancer. And a lot of my customers will ask me, hey, I'm already working with other partners for load balancing or for firewalls. The great thing about Azure is we have a list of thousands of marketplace solutions. So our partners that provide firewalls or load balancing, pretty much all of those solutions reside in what we call our Azure Marketplace, essentially our Azure store. And you can actually go out there and build solutions with your preferred vendor that are already pre-built virtual appliances that can reside directly in Azure, so you can take advantage of your existing monitoring tools or management tools from your partners on leveraging those same services in the Azure environment. So it's a pretty big space, and obviously when we're helping customers initially get onboarded into Azure, we spend a lot of time working with them and our partners on how services like ExpressRoute can fit into their environment and helping them get these services deployed so they can connect in the most efficient manner into Azure. And a little bit about ExpressRoute, and I'm going to let Chad here next go into some of the details of Equinix View. Essentially, ExpressRoute is our unified connectivity into the Azure cloud. And what customers really love about it and why they go there is, you know, we talk about things like predictable performance, the responsiveness, the resiliency, the SLAs around ExpressRoute into Azure. As I mentioned, the simplest thing is a VPN. Most customers may start there initially, but ExpressRoute is really where most customers are tending to go when they're betting their business on extending into a virtual data center in Azure. And Equinix, as I mentioned, is one of the few key partners that actually works with us in all of our specific Azure regions, including government, which is great. And we talk about things like establishing redundancy with our ExpressRoute circuits, and establishing Azure peering within the virtual networks is key when we talk about hybrid networking in Azure. I think if anything, I tell my customers is having the solid networking foundation when we're building out an Azure virtual data center is really probably one of the most key foundational items that you can do when we talk about things like networking and security and governance in the cloud. Networking is probably number one. And if you've looked and seen any of the Azure exam material or training courses, I had just passed the Azure Administrator course, and networking is probably the number one thing in the content for those exams, because it is a real key foundation when we start to plan that out and how that's going to work. When we and Todd showed a little bit of this, but when we look at ExpressRoute, when as far as our peering locations, this is what we publish, and Todd pretty much mirrored this in Equinix's diagram, but in Chad, I'll go a little bit more into detail on this and how we're peering. But this is all the places that we can look to peer ExpressRoute in, which pretty much covers most of the major footprint, with a lot of other peering locations coming soon out there. That said, Chad, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for the next section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dustin. So I will go ahead and see if I can advance the slide here. That'll work for me. Might just be kicking in, but as that's kicking in here, guys, first of all, thank you so much for joining. I know we're limited on time, and I want to make sure we actually leave time at the end of this session to really leave time for Q&A. There's a lot of questions out there, so definitely want to make sure that we are getting to the right point. So go straight to this slide here and start with, obviously, you've heard Dustin and Todd talk about how strong the Microsoft and Equinix partnership is. What I really want to focus on for the remainder of this session is really highlighting what are we seeing out there? What are the actual challenges that each of you as customers, as partners are facing real time right now? Not just the trends we've been seeing, because a lot of this is being turned on its head. What are the tools that you have access to? And frankly, what are the reference architectures that we see that can solve for some of these things, if not in real time, very, very quickly? So I'll start here with the fact that, what is it that we're actually solving for together? Performance, this is something that everyone is thinking about right now as everyone's moving into this remote, work from home scenario, based on this coronavirus pandemic. What does it mean to maintain performance and still consume and optimize applications in Azure or other clouds when I'm consuming them over the public internet? How do I do that? How do I ensure that I have the right choice to pivot if necessary and consume a new cloud that might not be one that's a part of my environment today? What is, and how can I ensure that I'm able to leverage the right cloud for the right workload at the right time in this one? And as these movements and destinations change, it requires a new security paradigm. So how am I ensuring that I do that to avoid further putting my enterprise at risk in these times? Because as we know, there will be bad actors out there that try and take advantage of an already very bad scenario. How do I help ensure my security? And obviously, this concept of digital transformation, it means different things for everyone. But I think that the fact that we're all, every one of us, being forced to transform through the fact that we're living in unprecedented times. In the last few weeks, we're all seeing what that means and are learning new things every day. So how do I ensure that I'm doing things the right way? So the next component here, and I like to start here because it's a baseline, but why is Equinix involved in any of these broad conversations like this? It starts with the fact that 96.4% of all global internet traffic is flowing through an Equinix building. Why is that possible? And I'm not going to belabor this point, but it comes back to our history and the fact that every network in the world comes to Equinix to peer. We are the intersections of the internet. And today, if you look at the far right-hand side of this diagram, it's about the fact that we, in concert with Microsoft and other global, public cloud and SaaS platforms, are giving enterprise users a future-proof control plane. It's putting the enterprise right in the middle of this completely dynamic backbone and capability to avoid the chaos of the internet wherever you can and connect privately to all these different destinations through ExpressRoutes and things like them. So the key thing here, and if you can see one other huge category that just highlighted COVID-19, that's obviously one more thing that's driving the need to change here. But these, the world that we're operating in is increasingly complex. We all know this. There are different things that are, being done in different clouds that also, we're finding operate best based on what might be already in place for an enterprise. So the complexity of leveraging what you have in towards that digital future is complex. And I think in this new world, Gartner's talking about by 2020, by 1 million new IoT devices by 2021 will be deployed every hour. That's only going to increase, as we continue to, leverage more data from the edge, do more things in these distributed environments. And obviously, this is, all too painful for everyone right now. Obviously, but even if you're not in the financial sector where you could lose $4 million a millisecond if you're behind your competition, this could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in any sector of any vertical globally. And how do we ensure that you have the right flexibility to leverage these things? So I really want to kind of get to the heart of what I think is really important to talk about today, and this is a big part of it. So if you kind of, before you read anything on this slide, think of it this way. Everyone out there, every customer, every partner of Equinix and Microsoft have legacy workloads. And those legacy workloads, as you think about moving them towards an Azure or other destinations, and what it's going to take to actually make these two things work together, those legacy heritage workloads, they don't do long-term relationships very well, or long-distance relations very well, I should say. That distance kills their ability to maintain that optimized performance. And this is exactly the challenge that we're out there working towards solving together right now, is that if you're able to get those access points, those on-ramps, so to speak, to those applications closer to where those end users are, that relationship is optimized. And I think, this is really the dichotomy of what's kind of pivoting right now around being able to pull that data and establish that control point closer to where that data is being pulled, either consumed or coming from. And that's really where Equinix comes into this equation. But I'll kind of highlight a couple key points here. So number one, if you think about that environment and how latency, the shorter the distance, the better things perform, this is how you lay that foundation. And I will say, one of the things that we wanted to highlight walking out of today's session is connect with Equinix, connect with your team at Microsoft. We are highlighting and doing customized digital edge strategy briefings. So when you think about these 5 strategic actions you can take, these aren't going to be the same for everyone, and how those are applied to your partnership, your enterprise, we want to be aware of that. And so get together with us to think about this. But if you lay the right foundation with this network at your core, it gives you the right way to go establish that control plane to give yourself both multi-cloud capability, but also an optimized hybrid cloud footprint. And we'll talk through this. But security, distributed data, how you're consuming those applications is critical. And I think that's really what I want to talk about next, is specifically how are we removing those obstacles to transform, and how are we removing those obstacles to actually optimize in this new world that we're living in. So what I want to focus on first is a visual. And I apologize, this is not a marketing slide. I just built this, but I really wanted to create a visual for everyone, because we get the question a lot when we're working with customers: what are the core in consuming anything, an application, a workload over the internet versus your legacy traditional MPLS, or versus a private line? And I want you to think about these visuals, because, and I know I looked at our attendee list. We have a lot of our enterprise customers and partners coming from Canada here today. So I'm going to use a very Albertan example. If you're consuming an application that's coming out of Seattle, hypothetically, it's being published in Seattle, from Calgary, Alberta, over the internet, that data is going to take about 80 to 100 milliseconds to be transmitted, to be consumed, depending on the time of day you're trying to consume that. If you do that over MPLS, you might see that latency reduced to, maybe 50 to 60 milliseconds, because it's a slightly more consistent path. But if you're doing that over a layer 2 private line, this is going to be a 18 to 21 millisecond route every single time. So the key that the visual that we want to create here is, think about the internet as chaotic as it is, and we, in some cases, we have to use it. But when you're thinking about moving these big workloads, you really have to do that on a high-speed rail, and that's what this diagram at the bottom really highlights here. So I wanted to create that visual because I think it's important to understand, when we're building these networks, and it's not to say that we're not using every element of these networks. It's about finding the right balance of these three. Let me go back one here, 1 second. So it's really about finding the right balance. And so once again, in today's world, we're to use internet as, an SD-WAN from the edge in a way that we didn't think we would have to, even a month ago. All the investments that customers have made into these legacy WAN architectures, we're trying to find different ways to leverage that. So really, it's about the right balance. How do you take, the internet access that you have, maybe even MPLS networks that you're working with today, and optimize them to distribute where those applications are being consumed, and simply remove that friction, remove that latency from the network, and by doing so, give yourselves the ability to scale that capacity, and really optimize the end user performance in this kind of a model. Once again, slide, but it paints a picture. If you've now established, an on-ramp in Silicon Valley or Chicago or DC, you can point all of that, the end user traffic coming from a residential home user now in this work from home environment, to the nearest on-ramp. So if you picture yourself sitting in the traffic on a Friday afternoon going home on a freeway, and all of a sudden you've got an exit right to your right that you can peel off on and get directly to the destination you're trying to go to, that's what these on-ramps are allowing you to do. These give you the ability for end users coming from any end user destination. It could be a Comcast, cable circuit, a DSL connection. You can point that traffic to the nearest on-ramp and consume those applications in Azure, in other destinations, in the more optimized manner. And oh, by the way, and this is the key right now, these things can now also be done and spun up on demand. You don't have to go, wait for these things to be turned on, and we'll talk about more of that in just a moment. But I want to really focus on exactly what that looks like in a little bit more detail here. And this is the viewpoint inside of Equinix. And once again, we really didn't want to talk too much about products here. But we're talking about hybrid cloud today and optimizing those express routes. There's a huge value to having a control plane that sits just outside of Azure, where you can bring in your internet, your SD-WAN connectivity, where you can also terminate maybe an existing MPLS network to this control plane, where you're managing your routing, your security, and your SD-WAN appliances, or even storage and compute as needed. And once again, then also build that bridge from your legacy data centers. This gives you a couple really key benefits. Number one, your egress costs are dramatically reduced if you have any sort of workloads going between the clouds and your WAN. If you're doing this over a Cloud Exchange port with Equinix, it's an average of a 10x reduction from about 12 cents a gig across all clouds over the internet to egress rates that drop below 2 cents a gig over the Cloud Exchange components. So massive reduction in egress charges. But beyond that, it gives you the ability to also spin these things up when you need them. So the key is here, you can actually spin up new ExpressRoute connections to Microsoft and other cloud destinations on demand, as well as platforms like Zoom and WebEx and all of these other collaboration tools that people are leveraging to work remotely right now that are so critical to maintaining business as we know it. So to leave out time for questions here, I'm going to go to one final slide to kind of highlight how we're doing that on demand, and that is what we're calling Network Edge here at Equinix. It allows you to spin up virtual routers, virtual firewalls, virtual SD-WAN appliances on demand in the markets listed below. That's Silicon Valley, that's Dallas, Chicago, Ashburn in the US today. Seattle and Toronto are coming very shortly in North America. But these things can be built on demand and give yourself the ability to actually establish these, once again, those on-ramps as close to your end users as possible to give them an optimized path to consume. These will be open source. You'll see this, there's multiple new devices getting added here. But if you're leveraging Cisco, if you're leveraging Palo Alto, Fortinet, CloudGenix, Juniper Versa, VMware, Velo, they're all live and more are coming soon. So I want to open it up for questions. But before I do that, just one more touch point here. Remember, we want to customize and work with you directly on what these solutions could look like for your enterprise. So that's what these digital edge strategy briefings are focused on, is looking at your environment and what can we do today to even leverage your existing infrastructure to optimize for this current environment that we're working in, and some small tweaks that could be made on the fly to assist. Great reference for some of the white papers and reference architecture we built at our iowakb.com. That's the interconnection-oriented architecture knowledge base.com for free and clear for everyone, but also a free trial of that Network Edge service. So as we talked about, if you want to go try out what might it mean to enable these routing edges for your business right now, that Network Edge is live today to be leveraged. So I'm going to pause. We have a lot of people on the line still. What questions are out there? What can Dustin and I and Todd help address?
Hey, Chad, this is Todd. Chad and Dustin, thank you very much for the great overview of the solutions available. We'll give folks another second or so here to chime in with some questions if they have them. If we don't get any, I just wanted to punctuate to the people on the line here that the digital edge strategy briefings are a fantastic way to double click and take a look at your own environment. It is a conversation, not a contract. It is free to you. It is something that we do on the daily as we are in the middle of these cloud conversations and helping customers optimize their WAN and modernize their data centers so they can remove the legacy barriers and consume more cloud. We're here for you together with Microsoft to help you, jump in wherever you are in your journey and help you transform. So we encourage, some follow up with a digital edge strategy briefing, and together we'll come forward and review your environment and help you in the areas that may need some assistance.
And I'll echo what I said earlier about, if you already have an Azure virtual data center or you're contemplating Azure, definitely don't underestimate, your networking design. Reach out to your Equinix team, reach out to your Microsoft specialist team. We both work very closely together to ensure that we work with customers on establishing the right design, the right connectivity model for you in Azure. It is key when you're planning a virtual data center, or if you're just getting started in Azure and you're looking to figure out where you need to go based upon what services you're planning on using in Azure. Definitely don't underestimate your networking choices and how you work together.
So with that, I would just comment, please stay safe and be well.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining today.
Yes, thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.